Good evening. Hope you're doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Chullin Daf Yud Zayin, and we are starting halfway down on Tez Zayin and Beis. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we're going to learn fairly quickly. This Gemara is well known for the different types of blades, and I've made a little bit of a drawing here. I hope you can all see it from here. We'll go through all five of these different types of knives. One of them is perfect. All the other ones have potential flaws, and we'll navigate that later. Let's get started. Amar Rav Chiza, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Ve'amri La V'masnisa Tana. Either Rav Yitzchak said it or it's in a brisa. Hey Dvarim Ne'emru B'krumis Shel Kana. There were five things that were said about a reed. Number one, Ein Shochten Ba. You should not do shchita with it, which is difficult because we already saw Mar Makomos that do allow for it. Ve'ein Malan Ba. Thank God. You're not allowed to do circumcision with the reed. Ve'ein Mechatchen Ba Basar. We're concerned about splintering in all of these cases, that there could be a splinter of a reed in the basar. Ve'ein Mechatzitz and Shinaim. You should not use it as a toothpick. Ve'ein Mekanchem Ba. And one should not wipe themselves with it. It seems to be that we're in the Havamim that we're talking about after one goes to the bathroom. We'll soon see that that's not what it means. So says the Gemara, Ein Shokten, but how can you say that you can't use a kanet? Tanya, we already learned this multiple times. We already learned that it's mutter to do that. Says the Gemara, Marapapa, Bisimuna de Agma. When do we say you're allowed to use a krumishel kana? That's only with a specific type of reed. Let's take a look at Rashi, 2/3 of the way down. Dibra Mascha Bisimuna de Agma. Esev Hagadol Ba'agme Maim. There's a certain type of grass that grows there. The Kari Lishka. Uchshehu Yavish. Once it dries, Chadud v'chotech. It's actually so strong at that point that it will cut. But it doesn't splinter. So you're right. In general, the average reed you should not use. Only ones that are simuna de agma. Then we said ve'ein mechatchen basar. Says the Gemara. While that is true in general, but Rav Papa was mechatech ba kirvei dagim de zigi. He was willing to cut fish because their innards were zigi. There was a translucence aspect. This is true, by the way. If you are inside fish, you can sometimes see through a little bit. Their meat is not as dense as other animals, so therefore he was able to always see the reed, and therefore he would use it to cut. Rabba Barav Huna Mechatech Ba'ufa the Rakich. He would use it not for bigger animals, but he would be willing to use it for birds because it wasn't difficult to cut the meat of birds. Just to cut up both chicken and steak tonight at dinner, one's much easier to cut than the other. When you're cutting raw, even cooked, when you're cutting chicken, it's much easier to cut. What does it mean ve'ein mekanchem ba? So in the Havamin, as mentioned, we were thinking that perhaps a person would use a reed to clean themselves after going to the bathroom, after defecating. Tepaglei, that should already be asr mishum de amar mar mekanech v'davar she'or sholataspo. If a person is going to clean themselves with something that's flammable, shina of noshros. This is a reference to probably sphincters or certain parts of the digestive tract that could get injured by these kinds of flammable things. So we don't want to use. We are anyways prohibited from using a kana for other reasons. Why did you have to add that in? Elamai, it must not be that that's what we're talking about. Amar Papa kinuach pimaka karmina. What we're talking about is using this reed to clean out a wound. That's what we're talking about, where we're concerned splintering. But you're right; it's already usher to use the kana for cleaning oneself after the bathroom. Yeah, thank God we have modern. Thank God, modern amenities. We're at the two dots about 15 lines from the bottom on Tez Zayin and the base. The Gemara says, Hakol shochten ula olam shochten. So this actually goes back to the Gemara, to the Mishnah that we learned yesterday on Tez Vav and Beis. It was a Mishnah. And I'll read the line from the Mishnah. Hakol shochten ula olam shochten uva kol shochten. It sounds duplicative. Sounds like we're missing a lot. So we're going to go through what all these phrases mean. Says the Gemara, Hakol shochten. What does that mean when we say Hakol shochten? That you're allowed to shecht anything. Hakol b'shchita. Everything needs shchita. Ve'afilu of. Even though the Torah doesn't otherwise specify that birds need shchita, what does the Mishnah from Tes Vav Amud Beis mean when it says Hakol shochten? Even a bird. And we're going to see. There's another machlokes here in Shas about whether or not a bird is considered flesh. That's a separate discussion. But over here, we do definitely see that a bird requires shchita, but that's only from the Mishnah. It's not even mashma from the Chumash that way. Even the birds that are mentioned in Chumash, they have malika. They don't have shchita. So it's a bit mechudash that we should even say that there is shchita. This is, of course, quoted lahalacha in the Rambam, and it is in Yoredea Siman Yud Gimel. We are obligated to do shchita with a bird. Says the Gemara. What does la'olam shochten mean? This is subject to a massive machlokas tanaim, a machlokas amoraim connected to a machlokas tanaim that we're going to learn now. This will cover the whole Amud until the bottom of Yud Zayin. But let's dig into a meaty, fascinating sugya. It says the Gemara L'Olam Shochten Man Tana. Who's the author who says that L'Olam Shochten? It must be Amar Rabbah. It must be Rabbi Shmuel. The Tanya, the Brisa says Ki Yarchiv Hashem Elokecha Zgulcha Kasher Diber Loch V'Marta Ochla Basar V'Gomer. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Lo Ba'akasuv Lahater Lo Ba'akasuv Ela Lahater Lehem Basar Taiva. The basar taiva is meat that you want to eat. It's not taiva in a necessarily a bad way, but again, if you have
It's the opposite of hektish.
right, it's non-hektish meat. It's chullin, literally the Masechta name. It's just regular meat, right? So he says that this pasuk was coming to be matir, regular meat. Well, what does that mean? So it says the Gemara, Shebetchila Nasar lehem b'sar taiva. Originally, before the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael, they were not allowed to eat meat, just stam. And then Mishanichnasu la'aretz, once they entered into Eretz Yisrael, then hutar lehem b'sar taiva. Good. So he says that's what's going on, that the pasuk is being matir for us b'sar taiva. Ve'achshav shegalu. Now that we no longer live in Eretz Yisrael, yachal, you might have thought yachzru le'isur harishon. You might have thought that we go back to the original isur chas v'shalom, and we would not be able to eat meat. That there's a real havamin in the Gemara that we're all vegetarians because you're not allowed to eat meat outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's what it sounds like from our Gemara in the Havamina phase. L'kach shaninu le'olam shochim. What time of history was it? What, in the Midbar?
Yeah.
It was before Eretz Yisrael.
No, I'm saying that they ate. Almost feels like it just wouldn't die. But I don't know. I thought Hashem sent this as shiur. Right. So
It could be that was a chiddush. I mean, because that was not a normal way to like.
And they weren't that considered busted.
Or it's not considered basar. What is that? It's a bird?
Busted, call it busted.
Well, they asked for busted.
It's
Yeah,
called-
that's what they got.
Habasar or dan ben shi'eham.
Right.
Pasuk is used as proof elsewhere, but it's
Yeah. So the question is, did it need shechita? And
Right.
if it needed shechita, was it a chiddush because the Kodesh Baruch Hu did it? It was al pi hamakom, and it wasn't regular.
Like
Yeah.
over
Yeah. Correct. It definitely wasn't normal. One way or the other, it's a great question, but it seems over here, the Rabbi Shmuel was of the opinion that before Eretz Yisrael, no one was allowed to eat meat unless it was from a korban. Once you were in Eretz Yisrael, then we were hutar lehem b'sar taiva, and in Galus we had a havamina that it wouldn't be mutar lekach sheninu la'olam shochten, only because of this Mishnah. La'olam shochten, and let me just translate it. La'olam shochten, even now that we are in Galus, we're still allowed to eat meat because la'olam shochten. Maskifla says the Gemara that if this is true, Maskifla of Yosef, Hi la'olam shochten, it should say la'olam shochten ve'ochlin mibayle. It's like ikar chaser min hasefer type of language. It's a little bit much that it's missing. That's what Rashi says over here. He has this line, 4 lines from the bottom. Ve'hechi shavak le'ikar milsa v'nakat shchita l'chuda. It's like the whole point of this was to say you're allowed to eat meat. Don't talk about shchita. Talk about achila. So that's what he's pushing against him. He says that Le'olam Shochten is really not the right language. Meikara, my time itzar. Why is it that originally we would have said B'sar Taiva was not allowed? That's because Mishum Dehavu Mekarve LeMishkan. Because in the Midbar, everybody was close to the Mishkan. How far could it be? It wasn't that far to go shech something. You can go shech something and eat the meat. What's the big deal? Well, if it's my time is true, and then why are you saying that it was mutter? Mishkan, because we were so far away. So says the Gemara, I don't need a fancy brisa to teach me that I'm allowed to eat meat. It can't be the Rabbi Shmuel's right. Rabbi Yosef doesn't agree with the approach that the Gemara presented. And just to keep ourselves clear, it was Rabbah who presented Rabbi Shmuel. Now Rabbi Yosef is going to present Rabbi Akiva. Let's just do some historical recognition here. Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef lived in the 3rd century of the Amoraim. They were about 75 years after Rebbe. Okay, and these Amoraim, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, were even before that. So they never saw these people, but this was going on 100 years, 200 years after the Churban. They didn't know at that time what the din was, whether or not there was this thing of B'sar Taiva being mutter or not. They didn't know. It's an unbelievable thing historically that they didn't know the answer to this question. And they weren't even that far removed. Their Zaydis knew Rebbe. Like I doubt they knew Rebbe, but Like somebody should have known this. Like the Tanaim were not that far away from them. Really, it's historically fascinating.
I mean, were they arguing with them actually? Were they just like us? We know we do it. The question is, what's the source? You know what I mean?
Well, there's going to soon be a more targeted machlok as to whether or not Rabbi Shmuel is completely off the reservation and really Rabbi Akiva's right, or vice versa. Their shitas are mutually exclusive.
Parents home. If I eat meat, did I not eat meat? If I ate
Right,
meat,
it seems that way. So let's look at Rabbi Akiva's shita because it really is the other side of the fence. Says the Gemara, Elo Amar Rabbi Yosef, top of Yod Zayin Amar Aleph, Rabbi Akiva. When we say La'olam Shochten in our Mishnah on Tesvav Amud Beis from yesterday, when we say that, really we're talking about Rabbi Akiva, meaning we have to define La'olam Shochten. Remember, we did the first phrase. We had to define that first phrase of Hakol Shochten, that Afilu Be'of. What is La'olam Shochten? So the La'olam Shochten, according to Rabbi Yishmael, is that in Galus you're still allowed to eat meat. What's the La'olam Shochten according to Rabbi Akiva? So says the Gemara, Detanya, Ki Yerchak Mimcha Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha Lasum Shemo Sham Zavachli Mibekarcha Mitzoncha. Rabbi Akiva Omer Lo Ba Kasev Ela Le'esor Lahen Basar Nechira, to say you're no longer allowed to eat an animal that's killed by non-shchita ways, bow and arrow, gunshot, whatever the case may be. I did a bris for someone. He told me that when his cows get big enough, he takes out a shotgun, says goodnight, and then he cuts the animal into pieces, and they have meat in the freezer for a year. I can't. Unfortunately, it is so close range. He literally cries.
You understand the question?
Yeah.
Meat.
Yeah. No, he doesn't ruin anything. It's a headshot right between the ears. He doesn't mess around. Even now, I think the system they use is they hold the animal's head and there's nechira, there's a huge spike that goes between the eye straight to the brainstem. Done. So that's called nechira. So Rabbi Akiva, hope you guys all ate dinner. So Rabbi Akiva says, why is it that we have this pasuk? It's to be oser besar nechira. Why? Shebetchila, before the Jews were in Eretz Yisrael, hutar lahen besar nechira. There was no din shchita when the Jews were in the midbar. Okay. Once the Jews entered into Eretz Yisrael, so then no more.
Why we said specifically in the Shulas that they had no place because they didn't know they was a shluta, but after they got their renewal.
That aligns very nicely to Rabbi Akiva. There was no shchita before Eretz Yisrael.
No. We got an Har Sinai. It became clear. So the midbar
Was it shiur or was it basar b'chol?
No, this is what Stan's talking about. That I don't know. I
assume that they
I'm not sure.
Oh, sure. Oh, okay.
The 12 house.
Okay, so it's the plus problem.
So says the Gemara. Let's finish up Rabbi Akiva. Ve'achshav shagalu yachol yachseru lehatiran harishon. Maybe now in Galus, maybe we should go back to the nechira ways. Much cheaper in Jewel, by the way. Much cheaper. Get that shotgun. By the way, guys, let's go. Says the Gemara, L'kach shaninu le'olam shochten. We always need to do shchita, offsetting nechira. Havamina that perhaps with Galus, the law would fall back to what it was to pre-Eretz Yisrael days, where nechira was an acceptable way to prepare an animal for achila. Kamash Malan the Mishnah from Tezvav Amud Beis of le'olam shochten. You have to do shchita. You're not allowed to do nechira. What'd you say?
Yes.
Oh, yes. It does, but not within Rabbi Shmuel. The question was asked within Rabbi Shmuel. To Rabbi Akiva, it answers. But now these two shitas are mutual. They don't agree with each other, bichlal. Right? So you have Rabbi Shmuel, who had a bit of a wild shita, who says that there's no meat, and that's what the olam is. The Talmud Lomar that you're allowed to eat the meat, even in Galus. And Rabbi Shmuel, that was his shita. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you're allowed to, you have to do shchita, you're not allowed to do nechira. But my kamiflage, what is it that they were arguing about? Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, 10 lines down. Rabbi Akiva sabar basar taiva lo itzar klal. Rabbi Akiva says, what are you talking about? We were always allowed to eat meat. Rabbi Shmuel sabar basar nechira lo ishtari klal. This is what bothers me. Again, like, how did you not know the answer to this question? Now, granted, the period of time when the Jews went into Eretz Yisrael was far prior to the Tanaim. I just would have thought that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel would have known. I'm wrong. I was too far away. I just it's this the chasm is huge between the shitas. It's so big. It says the Gemara as follows. Let's start pressure testing these shitas. Bishlam the Rabbi Shmuel. I understand according to Rabbi Shmuel who holds that basar nechira was never allowed, that you always require shchita. Hainu dechsiv shachat as ben abakar. It's state in Chumash. It's easy, right? Elo the Rabbi Akiva mai v'shachat. So he says, I was talking about Chullin, but Kachim shiny. By Kachim, I agree that you need to do Shechita. So when the Jews were in the Midbar, they would do Shechita on the Kachim and Nechira on the Chullin. Motor v'motor. That's how Rabbi Akiva understands the psukim. So that's question and answer number one. Question number two, a third of the way down. I could understand Rabbi Shmuel who says that Nechira was never allowed. The Torah says Yishachet. Elo the Rabbi Akiva, my hatzon ubakar Yishachet lahem. It shouldn't have said Yishachet. It should have said Yinacher lahem mibayle. Meaning, if you're saying that Nechira was allowed prior to being in Eretz Yisrael, why did the Torah say V'shachat? Says the Gemara, because Nechira shelahen zo hi shchitasa. It's just a way to kill the animal. You're being medayik into the word shchitasan too much. We're just talking about how to kill the animal. That's it. You want to call it shchita, call it shchita. I'm calling it Nechira. It's the same thing. They're just synonyms. Next question. Bishlam Rabbi Shmuel, Hainu ditnana shochet v'nisnab lo biyado. If a person is shechting and it becomes an avela during the shechita, v'hanocher, one who kills the animal through nechira, v'hame'aker, one who tears the simanim, that if any of these things happen, pater milachasos, says the Gemara, then there's no din of kisui hadam in these cases. Kisui hadam is tied to a good shechita. That tells us that nechira is a bad shchita because it says v'hanocher. Elo the Rabbi Akiva who says, who holds according to himself that b'sar taiva was always allowed and nechira was never allowed, then I don't understand. Amai pater milachasos. Says the Gemara, hol v'itzar. This is a very difficult answer to read in the Gemara itself, and we really do need the Rishonim here, but the point over here is to say as follows. Rabbi Akiva Taka agrees that in the Midbar, there would have been Kisui Adam. But once they were in Eretz Yisrael, there would be no more Kisui Hadam. The Gemara now asks question number 4. Do you have a question, Dad? You good? I thought you had a question.
No.
Says the Gemara halfway down, 4 lines before the wide lines. Bishlam the Rabbi Akiva, the Omar B'sar Taiva lo itzar klal. According to Rabbi Akiva, B'sar Taiva was never asar. Hainu dechsiv ach kasher yechel es hatzvi ve'eso ayal kein tochlenu. Do we ever bring a tzvi in the Beis HaMikdash? No, it's delicacy. It's venison. So the Gemara says, there we see that that's mutter. Obviously, the B'sar Taiva was never asar. Elo Rabbi Shmuel, tzvi ayal gufe mi have a shari. So says the Gemara, ki asar rachmana behema dechazil lehakrava. The only time the Torah said there was a problem was with animals that were for hakrava, but other animals were fine. Aval chaya de lo chazil lehakrava lo asar rachmana. Very good. So everyone's able to answer their questions.
Some exception.
Yeah. Well, he just, I mean, right? He cut a big.
Big exception.
Yeah. It's yeah. Aval chaya de lo chazil lehakrava lo asar rachmana.
Didn't mean no animals at all. I meant only
The
animals.
5 animals that we use in the Beis HaMikdash are limited. Okay, the Gemara is now going to do a historical note by Rav Yirmiyah. We're 2/3 of the way down, second of the wide lines on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Evare b'sar nechira shechnisu le'eretz Yisrael iman la'eretz mahu. Such a brilliant question. If nechira was mutter prior to Eretz Yisrael, and I brought myself a cooler of meat, cryovac, we're like ready to go, Romanian style, but it was all killed b'nechira, and I brought it into Eretz Yisrael. I know the next time I kill an animal, it needs to be done b'shchita in Eretz Yisrael now. That's what the pasuk says, the pasuk of Gevulcha. You're 100% right. But I did the nechira beheter in the midbar, and then I brought it in it's probably more accurately a salt thing than a cooler thing. But says the Gemara, what's the din? Am I allowed to still eat that meat? Asks the Gemara as follows, Emas. When are we talking about? Ilema b'sheva shekavshu, in the first 7 years where the Jews were going to town and they were taking over the country. Well, during that time they had a heter to eat even treif. So it says the Gemara that during those 7 years, hashta davar tamei ishtiri lihu, even something not kosher, even chazer was mutter to them during that phase. Tichsiv, how do we know? Because the pasuk says in Dvarim, the pasuk says ubatim aleim kol tov, that you can go into their homes. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ba'aba amarav kisle dechazire, you can eat out dried pig. This was mutter during this bacon, mutter during the 7 years of kibush. So then you're worried about basar nechira miboya. They're both killed benechira. At least one's kosher. So it's either pig that's like inherently usur and was killed benechira, versus a cow that's inherently kosher, which was killed benechira and was mutter at the time. So the Gemara says, well, no. The question is, now we're in Eretz Yisrael, right? Meaning you crossed it when you did the shechita, when you did the nechira, but then you brought it into Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says that's an unreasonable question, because at the end of the day, you're allowed to eat chazer right now. So if you're allowed to eat chazer right now, pashat, you're allowed to eat a cow, obviously. Ella said, what? It's unbelievable. That's what Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says. The crazy part about this Gemara is that there is absolutely nothing halacha l'mais about it, because it was a harasha. It's not like a regular halacha. It's purely historical.
No one argues with him on this.
Right.
That's even more so. So
Right. That's it. That I was thinking the same.
The what?
Everybody quiet, but they agree.
Everybody
Yeah,
agreed.
everyone agreed during that. It's a pasuk in Chumash.
Everybody agreed.
Yeah, everyone agreed. That's how Rabbi Yirmiyah understood the pasuk. It's just wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I don't know what I didn't look into this, but I wonder what the lumdus is. Like, is it milchemes mitzvah? Like, how do we? There's like special dispensations.
That way.
No.
Maybe because it was Sheva Shekivshu, so they were in a constant state of war.
Yeah.
Bacons. Oh my gosh, look at Rashi. Kosli the Chaziri. Chazir Yuvation, dried Chazir, Shikorn bacons.
That's unbelievable. The Agos V'Tzionim,
I'm sure that's what it meant.
oh, it's definitely what it meant. That's for sure. Bacons. Now we know where the word came from. Of course, a Jew figured it out,
Oh, fascinating. The next Rashi is actually better. Ubatim Malayim Kol Tuv. The
Yeah.
next words in the pasuk are via how to.
Yeah. We just
That's
didn't
the
know
clarity that you can.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
You see the chaychila, not
It's mutter during those 7 years.
Yeah, so like if you waited.
No. Different pasuk. No. This. No. Stop. You already got business ideas going in your head. Pharmacy's going to start selling Slim Jims all of a sudden.
They have the Mishkan, right?
I just got a shiloh from someone I punted. Somebody called me and said they're going through a very messy family situation. When the kids are with the father, they eat at Burger King. Kids are with the mother, they keep kosher. So the boy was walking through Jewel with the mom and pulled out a Slim Jim from like the cashier, like as you're checking out, and said, "Mom, can you get this for me, please?" So she called me and said, "What is the right thing to do from a parenting perspective?" I'm like, "Bro, I have no idea. Like, I have no idea." I cried. I mean, I didn't cry, but I was emotional about it. I mean, it's such a so terrible. So I connected her to someone with shoulders. So no, I didn't even hear the conclusion. Just a very sad shiloh. Maybe there's a heter from the Gemara. I don't know. I doubt it. There are no heterim for chazer anymore. It's also become the icon of Tarfus, but it was the thing that the Gemara says was absolutely mutter. Okay, let's get back into this. I don't know where I am anymore. Here we go. Oh, okay. So so we're asking this shaila. So therefore, pashut that it's not during the first 7 years. Ella, it must be li'achar mikan. That we're not talking about the first 7 years, we're talking about after that. So now I'm going to reframe the question because my gosh, this meat is very long lasting. You had to have done nechira before entering Eretz Yisrael, but now we're talking about years 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you're talking about beef jerky at this point, right? It's salted, it's lasted a long time, and now we want to know if you can still eat it. First of all, gross. I don't think we would ever do that.
No, so
No?
more at the very end of time discuss it. Happens just learn, right? Not just happen. I'm learning kind of stuff. I'm done. Salted meat after the second day, meaning the source for the word meat is in the Korban Shlom, which is eaten for 2 days. We have no source in the Torah that tells you after 2 days it's called meat any longer. So when you salt it, it loses its definition of meat. Tosfos says we eat salted meat all the time, so you can't do that anymore. But at that time, it wasn't really meat.
You're saying, are you saying it's parv? Or are you talking about basar versus?
The context in Tainus was specifically eating it right before Tisha B'Av. It's not really meat.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Salted meat is not meat, according to the Gemara. I'm surprised it's not brought here.
I don't remember that. I'm sure.
It doesn't have the same, it's not the simcha, like when you're talking about eating during the day,
Right.
that's like this.
But it's not
simcha
fleshik?
meat.
It's not.
Like, so
It
I
wouldn't
eat that,
appear,
but it's.
Beef jerky is literally the example of basar ben Shinai. Like it's like the.
Now, obviously, it had to be kosher meat to start with.
Pashut. Yeah, well, I shouldn't say pashut after today's
Yeah.
Gemara, but yeah. There's no pashut anymore. Not after this. So says the Gemara, Ella la'achar mikan, maybe the shaila that he's asking is after the 7-year mark. We did nechira before year 0, before they went into Eretz Yisrael. Now it's year 8. Really, it's in the 7 years. And ki ishru lahu shalal shal ovdei kochav. And the only heter for the Jews was to eat the b'sar chazer that they found in people's homes. That's fine. But didhu lo ishtari. But their own meat that they were shechting, they had to do it the right way. So therefore, no, you can't eat the nechira meat from before. You have to reshecht. So says the Gemara, teku. We don't know. We don't know the history. We don't know what happened. Amar Rabba, really it's Rava. Shanis, we had already learned about Hakol Shochten, where we said we include birds. We already learned about Ula Olam Shochten, which was where we saw the machlokas between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. What does Bakol Shochten mean? My Mishanisle. If you want to say that the words Bakol Shochten mean what tools can you use, that it's bein b'tzur, it can be a rock, bein b'schuchis, or glass, bein b'krumishel, it can be a reed. It can't be because hadum yedahanach tani. It has to be similar to the first 2 phrases. Hakol shochten is talking about what animal we shecht, including birds. Ula olam shochten is also talking about those kinds of things. If we look back and we talk about Rabbi Shmuel, what did Rabbi Shmuel say? That it would teach us that you're allowed to eat bisar taiba. So that's also talking about an animal. Rabbi Akiva, what did he say? Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion of whether or not the animal is allowed to be eaten b'nechira or shchita, all talking about the animal. So if you want to now say that Bakol Shochten is talking about the item that you cut with, you just change the subject. One subject was talking about that which we are consuming, and now you switch to that which we are cutting with. That's an unfair equivalence. So that's what the Gemara means. Hadumya dehanach tani. It needs to be that when we say bakol shochten, it can't be talking about a shchita knife because that's talking about how to cut. But then the phrase of bakol shochten and the olam shochten, we're talking about the subject of the cutting, not the knife itself. And ihanach b'shchutin, hanami b'shchutin, v'ihanach b'nishchutin, hanami b'nishchutin. If we were all talking about knives in the first 2 cases, I would agree with you that the 3rd case of bakol shochten should also be talking about knives, but we weren't. We were talking about birds, we were talking about nechira, we were talking about the subject of that which we cut. So therefore, we can't say that. Ella, says the Gemara, you're right. Ella Amar Rava, what does it mean, hakol shochten? Hakol is a language of multiple. So it says the Gemara, chada, one of the hakols, right? So there's 2 things, hakol asuye mine. Chada asuye kusi, to teach us about a kusi. V'chada la'asuye Yisrael mumer, they're the ones doing the cutting. La'olam shochten means bein beyom bein malayla bein berosh hagag bein berosh asfina, talking about timing and location. And bakol shochten is bein betzur bein b'schuchis bein b'krum shalkana. They just retooled everything. Now, of course, it's just these last three lines are so deceptively simple, but it really undermines everything else we just learned about the Mishnah from Tesvav and Beis. So it's elements of it are repetitive. Yeah, elements of it are repetitive. Yeah, for sure. Correct. We usually do it. Yeah, very difficult. And the first answer also provides a lot more lumdus, but okay, so be it. All right. Chutz mimagal katsir v'hamagir. We're now going to get into what types of blades are allowed to be used for shchita. So I'll just share with you that this top picture is what a blade looks like. Here's the handle right here. The top of the blade was very, very sharp and flawless. And we're going to discuss what that actually means. So that's our starting point. So says the Gemara on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Chutz mimagel katsir v'hamagira, Avu d'Shmuel pagam v'shadar. He kept sending to Eretz Yisrael flawed blades to see what the Rabbanim would say about it, trying to, again, always pressure testing. How do we know what an actual shchita nev? So shalchu leid, that all of these things that have all these divots and pegimas in them, kimagira shanina, they're like saws. They don't, pashut, you cannot use a saw because we're afraid of chonkin, as we saw yesterday, and it doesn't mean choking. Chonkin means it's going to tear. Okay, let's learn Tanu Rabbanan. Let's see, top of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, says the Gemara, Sakin sheyesh ba pegimos harbe tidon kimagira. Pashut, that if you have a blade that has a lot of tears in it, obviously it's going to be treated like a saw. What if v'she'ein la'ela pegima achas? What if it only has one flaw in the blade? All right, put on your thinking caps. If it's ogeres, then psula. If it's misuchseches, then kshera. If the one flaw it has is ogeres, which is a V, just a cut, a divot in the blade. We're going to discuss this in a minute. That's puzzle. But if it's misuchseches, and I'll describe it in a moment, then it's kashers. Asks the Gemara, 3 lines down, Yud Zayin Amud Beis, Hechi dami ogeres, Hechi dami misuchseches. What is an ogeres and what is a misuchseches? Amar Rebbe Lazar, ogeres is where you can feel the flaw, mishtei ruchos, and misuchseches is where you can feel the flaw only miruach achas. So look here at the second picture. If you look where my fingers are, you see how there's a V shape in there? If I ran my finger across the top of this going this way, I would fall into the divot. And if I ran my finger going this way, I'd also fall into, that's ogeres. That's not kosher. But look at this one. Over here, it's not V-shaped. Over here, if I go this way, I'll fall into the divot. But if I go this way, I won't get stopped. There's nothing that's pausing me from doing shchita. You're right, there's missing blade, but it's not going to tear the simanim. If it's ogeres, it's going to tear simanim. If it's misachseches, it's not, but only in one direction. In this case, you have to be pushing this knife away from you, holacha. If you did hova, it'll hook it. That's for sure. Now, so now that's what the Gemara is going to say right here. So it says the Gemara, "Ma'ishna mishtei ruchos." When it's an ogeres and it's a V, you'll catch the blade either way. Demorsha kama machlish, it's going to catch first on the skin. Umorsha basra baza, and the second time you run over it, it's going to tear the simanim. Meruach achas nami, even by misuchseches, you still have a problem with misuchseches, which is churfa de sakina machlish morsha baza. You still have a problem where there's a flaw in the knife of the misachseches, even though it's only one directional where you're going to feel the flaw in your finger, you're still going to tear. Says the Gemara, to koim aresha de sakina. No, the flaw of this blade is not where I drew it. It's all the way at the end, and you're good to go. So says the Gemara, sof ki azla machlasha ki asabaza. But in your back and forth motion, you're going to catch it. You're going to use the whole blade. That's the presumption of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, kigon shaholich velo hevi. When we're talking about the misachseches, as long as the flaw is as I've drawn it here in this third picture, this guy, if I only push the blade this way, so then it will still cut smoothly. If I pull the blade back with me, it will tear. But pushing away holacha, there's no snag, and therefore it's kosher. That's the Gemara's distinction between ogeres, where the V shape is something that you can feel in both directions, versus misachseches, where it's only felt in one direction. And if I only do holacha, then it is a kosher shchita. That's what the Gemara says. There's a presumption of the Gemara that you use the whole length of the blade.
We're going one direction.
It's because we're going in one direction. We assume you use the whole blade, but you're only going in one direction. So if the meat comes across the blade this way, so it will just fall to the next part of the blade, but not snag. If the meat was coming across this way, it will snag. That's the distinction the Gemara is making. But there's more to speak about here. The Gemara says, Omar Rava, let's just sharpen this picture. Gimel midos besakin. There are three measures, literally, of a sakin. Ogeres lo yishchot, that's the V shape, where you can sense it in both directions. You should not do it. V'imshachat shchitaso psula, we assume that the simanim were torn. Mesuchseches lo yishchot balachatchila v'imshachat shchitaso ksher. It's not kishmak, because if in fact you do draw the blade back, then you're going to tear simanim. Maybe b'di'evet it's allowed, but not lechatchila. What about olev yored? What if there are raises and dips in the blade, but it's not divots, it's just wavy? So says the Gemara, shochet balachatchila. That's the fourth picture over here, where there's a wave. It's not level. Let's say there was a divot here and I sanded it down so that I got rid of it. Now it's perfectly smooth, but it's not straight. The blade has a nice little, it doesn't matter as long as it's smooth. And of course, this is something the Rishonim have to deal with. Of course, what's going to happen is there's a breaking point and that upward curvature of the blade where we say it's going to snag. Okay, so that's.
But a serrated blade qualified for the curves?
Serrated blade is totally puzzle. We would treat that like a saw, because there really is this, between the peak of one and the peak of another, the skin like kind of slow, what you're cutting will kind of like bounce back and forth a little bit. That's a huge problem in Hilchos Shchita. That would be what's called being ma'akir. That does not work. And then says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Huna berei de Rav Nechemia le Rav Ashi, Amrislan mishmei de Rava. You told us separately that misuchseches is psula, the one directional flaw in the blade. You said was psula, but the hamisachseches kshera. We learned over here that it's kasher. Lo kasha. Kansha holich vehevi. If you go back and forth with mesachseches, I'm asking 100% the animal is going to be a nevela. But kansha holich velohevi. If it's one directional, you're good to go. Amar le Rav Acha berei de Rav Avi le Rav Ashi damya l'sasa'a mai. What if there are waves, not quite serrated? There's just waves that are just continuous, but there's no jagged waves. Amarle, man yoy let me bisra v'achlinon. Who's going to bring me the meat? Little tongue in cheek. No problem at all. Mutter v'mutter. That was the fifth picture that I drew here, which is if the blade has gentle waves in it like this, the top of the blade, so then that is absolutely mutter. Let's learn a little bit more. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chizda, minayin lebedika sakin mina Torah. How do we know that checking a blade is a din deoraisa? Meaning, before we do shchita, we're obligated to check the shchita knife. Shenemar u'shchatetem bo ze va'achaltem. Check with this. What is the this? Pashat that he must have checked the blade. And says the Gemara, Pshita, Kevan dechinakav treifa. Now we know, obviously, that we don't need a pasuk for that. If I make this mistake and I tear the siman and the animal's a treifa, obviously you have to check. Says the Gemara, what did the pasuk mean? L'chacham ka'amrina. What I meant is that not a shochet, a Talmud Chacham has to do the checking. Says the Gemara, wait, we already learned about a Chacham. The Amar of Yochanan, lo Amar l'haro sakin l'chacham el b'mnei kvodo shel Chacham. Not because of Hilchos Shchita. We just, it's the right thing to do. And when the Dayan walks in there, you show him the blade. But there's no, it's not because of Hilchos Shchita that we show him the blade. It's just out kvod Chachamim. Says the Gemara, you're 100% right. It's not a din d'oraisa to check. Rather, it's a din d'rabbanan, midrabbanan, v'kras machta ba'amu. Now let's talk about the different methods of checking the blade, and we'll have to stop by 9:30, so we have about 5 minutes. I hope to get to where I want to. Says the Gemara, b'ma'arava badki b'shimsha, badki la b'shimsha. They would use the sun, how the sun reflected off of it, or according to one version in Rashi, the shadow that was cast by the sun looking at the blade. B'narda badku la b'maya. Here too, there's two options. Either you are running it in water, over water, and it will leave a different ripple if there's a thing, or you're pouring water over it, and that, if there is a flaw in it, you'll be able to see it. Rav Sheshes, this is a manly man. Badak le beresh lishna. Wowzers. He would lick the front of the knife to say, please don't try this at home. Rav Acha bar Yaakov badak le bechut hasara. He would take a hair and run it over the sides. Besura amre bisra achla bisra lebadka. If the knife's going to be cutting meat, we have to check it on flesh. Check it on your hand. Check it on basar. Check it on flesh. Stop checking it on other things like water. What does it have to do with anything? Try it on meat. Try it on your finger. Amar Rav Papa, tzricha bedika abisra ve'atufra. When this is in fact quoted in Shulchan Aruch and Yoredeya, that we're obligated to check a blade abisra ve'atufra. So what we do is we take the sharp side of the blade and we run it on our nail. Our nails are very sensitive to feel things. They themselves are dead, but our finger bed can feel them, and that's atufra, that's your nail. And abisra, you kind of feel the sides of the blade, kind of run your fingers on the sides of the blade like this to see if there's any flaws. And now there's a machlokes about whether or not this is completely accurate. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, Amar lan Rav Sama Breda Rav Misharshe Mishmech. But hold on one second, you said something different. Amar Sle Mishmei the Rava Tzricha B'dika B'Sir V'Atufra Ve'Atlas Ruchta. You also have to check the full sides of each blade, even though the cutting only happens at the sharp part of the blade. Amar le, I did say Abisra Ve'Atufra Amri, but Ve'Atlasa Ruchta Lo Amri. I did not say that it's on the full sides of the blades. That you don't need. And Ikad Amri, that it was the opposite dialogue. Abisra Ve'Atufra Ve'Atlasa Ruchta Amri. Mishmei the Rava Lo Amri. I said that, but Rava didn't say that. Ravina V'Rav Acha B'rei de Rava. Havu Yasve Kame de Ravashi. They were sitting in front of Ravashi. Aisu Sakin Lakame de Ravashi Labadka. A knife was brought in front of him to check it. Amar Le the Rav Acha Bere de Rava. Bidka, you go check it. So Badka Atufra ve'Abisra ve'Atlasa Ruchta. He did check it the way that was not the way that was initially presented. Amar Le Yasher Givaldik. That's the right way to check. V'chen Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Yemar Amar Atufra ve'Abisra Tzricha Atlasa Ruchta Lo Tzricha. You don't need to do it on the sides. You really only need to check the blade part and make sure that there is no nicks. Says the Gemara, after all, Milo Amar Abzeira Amar Shmuel Libein Sakin v'Shachat Bashchitas. Remember, we learned about this. If you have a boiling hot, sharp blade and you shecht an animal, aren't we concerned that the heat of the blade burned through the simanim and the animal's an avela? No. Why? Shechidu de kodem lelibuna. The kashalon ha'ikat stud. And we asked at that time, wait 1 second, but when you cut, the hot part of the blade is still touching the simanim as you cut. Says the Gemara, that's not correct. We say no, that the second you cut, it's as if there's a tension on the second you cut, they split very quickly. So the sides of the blade do not, in fact, touch the simanim. Hachanami, the same is true over here. And therefore, you only have to check a knife abisra ve'atufra and not atlas ruchta. We'll stop right here. Mirza Hashem, pick up tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
So on this knife in my office,